Why did I go to college? I wanted to acquire knowledge that would take me beyond where I was as a small town girl in Western Kansas. I loved my town, I loved my parents, but I wanted to go beyond. I looked recently at the internet site for Southwestern College, and I was pleased to realize that they still have those same 4 goals, the same 4 ministries they had when I started college. The first one was intellectual growth. The second one was individual development. The third one was lifelong learning. And the fourth one was leadership. So I began to ask myself, who was it at Southwestern who really helped me to reach the goals that the college had set for me, as well as for the college? I know that most of you here would not recognize even the names, but I need to say that my psychology professor, William Moneypenny, was the person who helped me to better understand who I was. I remember Lillian Cloud. I worked for Lillian Cloud for 3 years as her assistant in the PE department. I learned all the rules, all the regulations, and how to play all of the games that were taught for the women at Southwestern College. It was wonderful. I used it for the rest of my life. I also met Ada Herr. I want to recognize Ada Herr because she was a real inspiration. Ada Herr was my sociology professor. You've all been in the main building, which was only one of 3 when I was here on the campus. Ada Herr's office was way down on the lower level in the corner, and she taught sociology. She was a wonderful person, helped me to understand my place in society. She wrote in my yearbook this: as a teacher and student, but also as a friend to friend, I appreciate your relationship. And then she went ahead and she wrote below, relationships, relationships, relationships. They have the deepest meaning. And as I read and reread what she said, I concluded that probably that was what I learned at Southwestern College. I want to share with you briefly just some of the people who made a difference in my life. And I want you to, as you listen, think about whose life have you changed? Did you make a difference in somebody else's life? Who made a difference in your life? Did you remember to say thank you? Dale Dunlap. Dale Dunlap was a senior when I was a freshman. If you look in the one of the annuals, you will note that he was the editor of the college yearbook and the college newspaper, both at the same time. And I was the business manager. I had forgotten I was the business manager. I don't like to handle other people's money, but I did. There was another person who signed one of my albums. His name was James Lewis McNeil. Why did I know James? James I knew because his father and my father grew up together on joining farms way out in Seward County. And both of them remained friends for many years. When I got ready to go to Southwestern College, The one thing that my father told me was, Ruth, you've got to introduce yourself to Mr. McLeod, to Mr. McNeil, because Mr. McNeil was his best friend. The nice part about it was that he also had a son who was a freshman at Southwestern that year. And so James, and my son James is not necessarily named for this man. Sorry, James. James and I became acquainted, and we did many things together. And he and I were very active in some of the events here on campus, as well as those at Grace Methodist Church, which is at the corner of the campus. James and I, one of my memories is that we went to Wichita to see Porgy and Bess. Now again, keep in mind, I was a young woman from way out in the southwest corner of Kansas. Until that time, I didn't understand what was happening in New York City on Broadway. But together, James and I went to find out all about Porgy and Bess. I treasure the relationship I had with James. I had lost track of him a little bit, but I discovered recently by going on the internet, James is a pediatrician in a community that is in the suburb of one of the large cities in Arizona. And down in the corner, there's a little teeny-weeny picture of James as he is today. He looks just like I remember his father looking when I was at Southwestern College. The second person that I want to remember with you was my very best friend. Her name was Lou Snyder. She became Lou Snyder Carter. She has a very important person here with us today. I named my first daughter Lou, Virginia, Lou, and she's back there on the back table. But Lou and I became friends our freshman year at Southwestern. We did many things together, and often we enjoyed just being together and talking. One of our favorite pastimes was to read to each other out of our English literature textbook or out of one of the books that I brought to college from my father's and mother's library in my home. There's a difference of opinion. Lou thought she brought it, I thought I brought it, but it doesn't really matter. We both had copies of 101 famous poems. Can't you just imagine we two smart college students sitting together reading poetry out loud to each other? It is a fond memory, and I will always carry it with me. The summer after my freshman year, I invited Lou to visit me in my home in Winfield, Kansas. And after spending a week together, we went with my parents out to Colorado, way out on the western side of Colorado, high on one of the ridges where the elevation was about 14,000 feet high. And we laughed one day when we came in after being out all day long and realized that Lou was cold. Lou had donned 3 layers of clothing, okay? And so my father laughed, and we all laughed, as Lou took off 1 layer, folded it up, and put it on the bed. She took off a 2nd layer, folded it up, and put it on a bed. But she was just a wonderful, wonderful person to be with, and I was delighted to name my first daughter for her. My favorite photograph of Lou and I together is with my sister Mary on that trip we took together with my parents to Colorado, and we went fishing and we went mountain climbing. And recently, a niece of mine sent me this photograph. I had forgotten it had even been taken. Here was Lou on one end, Ruth was in the middle, my sister Mary was next to her. I like having something to remember her by. And so I thought you would also enjoy knowing that we had a wonderful time, started at Southwestern College. And so I treasure the relationship I had with Lou Snyder Carter. I asked my 3 children, very briefly, if they could write down for me one thing that they thought was important, that they remembered, either between me or between me and my husband Bill, who is deceased, and tell me something about why or what difference did it make in their lives. So the first response I got was from Virginia. Virginia's at the back table. And here is what she wrote. My mother, Ruth, has lived in many places during her lifetime. When our family moved to Kansas during my late elementary years, I remember her enthusiasm and love of Kansas. She was involved in many civic and religious organizations. As my parents moved to many places beyond Kansas, I noticed that Mom, as she called me, always bloomed where she was planted. I love that phrase, always bloomed where she was planted. Virginia said, as I have learned about her time at Southwestern College, I connected her passion to all the group life in her college years, her participation in Linneans, the Methodist Youth Fellowship, student government, co-op, physical education, and Mayfate, and many other things. I know, says Virginia Lou, I know I have learned to adapt to circumstances and contribute to organizations because of her example. I treasure the relationship I have and still have with my daughter, Virginia. My second daughter is Carol. Carol is also here today. Carol wrote, when I asked her what she might comment on, the following. Just 15 years ago, she said, Mom and I took a trip to Switzerland. It was one of the favorite places my mom and dad used to go years ago. What I remember the most was going to the top of the Jungfrau Mountain. It was incredible, but the best part of the experience, she said, was the zip line. You know what a zip line is. Once fitted with a harness, we each climbed about 20 or 30 more feet to the very top. After being connected, with a harness, we were clipped to the zip line. Carol remembers that the zip line was amazing. She says she let go of her hands. I have a photograph of her. Here's the zip line, and Carol, my dancer Carol, has her arms stretched out, and she rode the zip line to the very end. And she says, what a rush. And then right behind me, Mom came gliding along. Such an amazing, wonderful day. And then she added, I was so impressed that at the age of 83, my mom was gung-ho to experience the zip line. How many people at that age would even consider it? Mom has never let age be a barrier to what she wanted to do. She is a wonderful role model. I treasure the relationship I have with my daughters. And then there's James. You know, you would think that 3 children, they would all turn out to be just alike, and they are not. Okay. So I said to James, what can you say? So he wrote the following. Throughout my life, Mom has always given back to society in some way. Dedicated to higher education, a counselor, college administrator, church volunteer, good friend to many. That attitude, he says, has rubbed off on me, a desire to see the bigger picture and gauge if what I was doing is making a positive benefit to the world. She is a very accomplished woman, always learning and curious for new things. She doesn't know what it means to be lazy, always productive. I keep these characteristics, he says, at heart and hope to be as accomplished as she is. I treasure today my relationship to my son, James. And then there is Ida Herr again. Ida Herr, who said, as teacher and student, but also friend to friend, Ida wrote in my yearbook, I appreciate of relationships. And then she added it again. Relationships, relationships, relationships. They have the deepest meaning. I want to thank you for coming. Southwestern College was an important period in my life. I hope I've been able to convey to you how important my relationship was to this college, how important my relationship is to my children, to my friends, how important my relationship is to those of you who I have just met, or to the students I met yesterday in the Student Center. Relationships, they are the most important and have the deepest meaning. Thank you.